Hi everyone. I'm Leah McTiernan and I will be your host today. I hope everyone is ready to hear some great insights from the best SE leaders that I know. We are so excited to have you joining us today and want to thank you for being part of the PreSales Collective. Thank you for supporting WISE. We appreciate each and every one of you for your contributions and for carving this time out of your day. And I'd also like to thank our panelists for joining us today as well. So I know you may be asking yourself, how do I get the most out of today? How can I get the most out of this session? Well, we're going to be sharing with you all of our insights around self-advocacy, but what we'd love in return is just to hear from you. So please participate. You can ask questions in the chat. You can use the Q&A, and then we'll try to weave that into the conversation, especially towards the end of the webinar today. All right, so before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this event, Consensus. Consensus is an intelligent demo automation software that was built to help you scale pre-sales. They're used by leading companies in a variety of industries to bring prospects to live demos better educated and ready to talk specifics about your products. Using Consensus, your sales engineering team essentially builds a library of reusable interactive video demos that sales sends out on demand. Consensus automatically personalizes the experience and then tracks the engagement. This reduces unqualified demos to near zero and can double your pre-sales team's productivity. And I think if we look at the stats, their growth and their statistics and the data validate the approach. The two most impressive on here being almost 3 million stakeholders discovered through automated demos. And then the average cost of demo, when you compare the automated price to that of having your team delivering the live demos, it's very compelling. So if you would like to see an automated demo for yourself, check them out at goconsensus.com. All right. Time to get into the event, and I wanted to open and share that this is the third event of the year hosted by the PreSales Collective WISE program. WISE is Women in Solution Excellence, and our 2020 theme or 2022 theme is Reset and Refocus. As we take on the second full year of the pandemic, we are focusing on our energy, on rooting ourselves in what serves us and building a powerful toolkit to be more present and focused in our work. Self-advocacy is an important part of that. And today we're going to be speaking about this in pre-sales, covering a multitude of topics like the job market, staying power, negotiations, and so much more. So now I'd love to have our expert panelists introduce themselves. And Cristina, we'll start with you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Leah. Cristina Weir. I'm the Group Vice President here at Oracle. I run the North America Solution Engineering team, focused specifically on Oracle Digital. I'm actually based out of Northern California, sunny Northern California. I think it's going to be a balmy 80, 82 degrees today, so come visit anytime. And I've actually been in pre-sales for, I'm embarrassed to say this, but for 26 years. Wow. Yeah, it's a long time. I think I started when I was 5. That's what I like to say. When I was 5 years old. Yeah, because the numbers don't quite match up. But yeah, I started my career at Oracle back in 1994 in pre-sales, and I just came back about a year and a half ago, again leading a team at Oracle. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. Kate?
Yeah, thanks, Leah. So I'm Kate McArdle, and I am SVP of Solutions for Salesforce, and my team focuses on Service Cloud for North America. I am coming to you from slightly hazy, I'm not quite sure what it's doing outside Philadelphia. We've had a very weird, wet, cold spring so far, so here's to hoping it gets back on track there a little bit. Don't come here, go see Cristina instead, because it sounds like she's got better weather. I have also been in pre-sales since the early 90s, which is a little alarming to say. I started out on the customer side of the house, and because they wanted a female voice in the IVR, I got to know a bunch of telephony vendors, and they sucked me over to the dark side of solutions. And so I've kind of never looked back. I love solution engineering. So yeah, really excited for this panel today. Thanks, Leah.
Yeah, thank you. Nancy?
Hello there, Nancy Seid, great to be here. I am currently the Regional Vice President for Solution Engineering at Twilio, and my team covers North America, specific to enterprise, verticals, ISV, and public sector. I've been here about 3 years after a very long career at Oracle, also, Cristina, over 20 years. About 22 years in the pre-sales space, also started when I was 5. But I think you'll hear from a lot of us, and you hear from a lot of SCs that we fell into it. It's not something we knew about in school or set out to take a career, have a career progression around. So this PreSales Collective community, I think, really helps that, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. I live in Long Island, New York, and it is actually beautiful out, but I hope to see the sun at some point today.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. And I'm Leah McTiernan, GVP of Pre-Sales at DocuSign for North America. Our team covers all segments, and it's broader than just pre-sales. It's industry and value engineering, solution architects, demo engineering, and proposal management. And I am also East Coast, based in Philadelphia. Kate, I have to say, Kate and I are a little, like maybe what, like a half hour away. It's really sunny and beautiful in the city right now. So hopefully you're getting that, and I'm not getting what you have. But I've also been in pre-sales almost 20 years. So clearly we have some powerhouse panelists here with some longevity and tenure and all around great experience. And I'd love to start out with you, Cristina. I mean, you are such a senior leader, so much experience, GVP. How did you get to this point in your career? And I'd love to just hear if there are any notable milestones, or where or how has self-advocacy played a role in your personal career progression?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's interesting. As I said, I stumbled into this really 26 years ago. My first career out of college was actually a tech support role. And as part of tech support, it's, I always talk about how the way you move up in an organization is it's almost like jumping into that burning bridge, doing the work that others really want to may shy away from. And that's kind of what's created some of the milestones in my career. For example, leaping from tech support over to Oracle, there were some challenges in tech support. I helped a company, Samsung, actually flew out to Seoul, Korea, helped get their systems up and running. And because of that, that kind of built my brand on someone who was willing to do something at a different pace, get them up and running. And the SC manager, I should say the support manager, moved over to pre-sales, and she brought me along as part of that. So that's kind of one of the key milestones. I think Nancy talked about this, that no one knew what pre-sales, that role even existed, or how great, in my opinion, that pre-sales role is. And so some of the key milestones have to do with really focusing on areas that are challenging areas, and then driving that over to your career and and showing value with it. As it relates to self-advocacy, it's interesting. I kind of think of self-advocacy in two key areas. One is, of course, being able to highlight and talk about your core strengths, an individual's core strengths, right? But the other is also advocating when, perhaps personal and professional all kind of blend together. As much as we want to separate it, there are milestones that can happen in one's life that may shift or change things, and you need to be able to advocate for that and advocate for support on that. I'll just give you one example. When I first joined a company called Cognos, business intelligence company, joined in August, I found out in September I was pregnant, and I didn't even know what to do. As an SC, taking on a role that required 80% travel, the first thing I thought was, gosh, I'm going to get fired, or I'm not going to make it through this because I can't. I'm going to be pregnant. At some point, I won't be able to fly. And then what happens when I come back to work? And what was interesting, it was probably one of the scariest things I had to do, but I had a skip level with my VP at the time, Tanya Sanchez. So shout out to Tanya. She's actually at Salesforce. She's great. I had this one-on-one with her, and I raised that, hey, I'm pregnant. I want to stay at Oracle. I don't think I can in this role because it requires 80% travel, and I don't think I could be as effective. And so, I asked, is there anything that can be done? And she was amazing. She says, give me a month, don't leave, give me a month, and let me see what I can do. And within a month, just because I opened up, kind of put that vulnerability out there of myself, she moved me to the West region, which required virtually no travel, and drove success of the West region, and eventually got promoted as the SE manager, eventually ran the entire West, which I'm not sure how Chicago and Dallas falls into the West Coast, but these lines of demarcation. Yeah, eventually I became a BU executive at IBM and covered that. But that's an example of a self-advocacy that isn't just focusing on strengths, but really some of the things I need on a personal level.
I love that. I love that. And I never knew when we were prepping for this that it was Tanya. So I know her as well. She's phenomenal. That's a great story. That's a great story. I'd love to hear some other perspectives on this. Maybe Nancy?
Yeah, absolutely. Self-advocacy has played a huge role in my career, but I think it's important that we point out that my confidence to advocate for myself has evolved over time. Not everybody is confident to do so out of the gate or comfortable speaking up for yourself. And I hear this a lot from the people that I mentor or sponsor within our organization. So I think one way to go about that is to learn what works for others and then modify that according to what works for you. It's very personal on being able to feel comfortable doing what we're talking about today and what this webinar is about. Not everybody would be comfortable running into an elevator like I did, and the sales VP was in there and I wanted him to support me because I wanted to go for a position in this new program that Oracle was rolling out that was going to teach me how to be an SC. And I knew I wanted it. I heard about it. I overheard someone talking about it, and I just went for it. And he did. He supported me, and I got into the program, went through this intensive program that was really beneficial to a lot of us in that cohort, and came out of that as an associate SC, the very lowest level at the time. And then I worked my way up over 20 years, through the SC ladder, and then eventually into management. And one thing I did all throughout that time that worked really well for me was when someone gave me a compliment or said, that was a great demo, or I really like the way you pitch this, I got up the courage to say, would you mind just putting that in an email to my manager? And I'll tell you, I never once heard no. People want to help you. And that was one way that I found really helped me succeed, because while my manager couldn't be in every meeting I was in or have a real, front row seat to what I was doing, they were hearing from these people that were complimenting me, and it helped build my brand over the years and really helped me progress. And then, 3 years ago, Twilio found me, and I used that experience that I had selling to enterprise over all those years to market myself for this new job and advocate for myself, so that, knowing nobody at Twilio, I was able to rebuild my brand based on the experiences that I had. And I think that overall, self-advocacy for me has been about being successful in the job that I had at the time, not thinking about where I wanted to go, but using that in order to ask for what I wanted. I would use specific examples and data points of my accomplishments. And once you have that, you really feel more confident, at least I did, about being direct and clear in what I'm asking for.
Fantastic. I can relate to a lot of what you're saying, especially around, and I think it's important just knowing, like, we do have majority individual contributors on the line, that, you know, confidence does develop, right? And I think just the fact that we can have this forum and be able to hear from strong women leaders in the industry, and, you know, be able to kind of take everyone through our journeys as well. Hopefully it will help all of you develop that confidence even earlier in your careers, which is fantastic. Kate, I'd love to hear from you as well. Any perspective to share?
Yeah, you know, I think advocating for yourself comes in a lot of different flavors, right? And we heard very different ones from Cristina and from Nancy. And I think it all starts from kind of knowing what you want, maybe not the specific roles, but what are you trying to do? What drives you? What motivates you? And where are you trying to go? And so, you know, for me, a little over, 10 years ago, I was working for a small company. I'd been there for 10 years. I'd been promoted up through the ranks. I had unbelievably great opportunities. I was leading the product management team and working for the CEO, and it was great. But I realized at some point, I don't want to be a CEO. Like, that's not my next step. That was never part of my DNA, still not part of my DNA. I was traveling 3 weeks out of every 4. And so I really had to take a step back and think, okay, this is what you don't want to do. What is it that you do want to do? And so thankfully, I had a great conversation with my CEO, who's my boss, and I kind of shared with him my thoughts and what I was really trying to do. And he was very supportive. He's still a mentor of mine today, thankfully. And I realized what I wanted to do is I wanted to go back to being an SE. For me, that was life balance. For me at that point was more important than anything else. And so thankfully, I heard of this company called Salesforce, had never heard of them before. Knew a lot of people from my past who were there, and got a chance to go be an SE at Salesforce, which, I might be biased, but I do think being an SE is the best role there ever is. And so, yeah, it's been a great move for me. I retained my CEO as my mentor. And I would just encourage everybody on the call not to think about your path as just forward. It might be sideways, it might be into a different lane altogether. Just really think about where you're trying to go and what next step might help you learn the next thing to get you where you're ultimately trying to go. And make sure you're not just kind of progressing through the career path because you think that's right. Check in with yourself and make sure that you're actually happy and still motivated and still want to be on that path. Because I think a lot of us just get in our silos and we want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that story about your journey. I mean, and I think there's a common theme here that, like, advocating comes in all different shapes and sizes. I think one of the most important lessons I've personally learned, and to kind of echo what, all of you are saying, is, there's advocating for yourself, but almost equally as powerful is others advocating on your behalf as well. So great insights. Thank you. And to just shift gears a little bit in the conversation, as all of us know here on the panel and all of you in the audience, the job market is hotter than ever. Thank you, PreSales Collective, in a good way. You're just continuing to elevate the brand. And again, what a phenomenal career this is. Nancy, I'd love to hear from you, your perspective on the benefits that staying power has and building your brand within one company, and how, if you can do that, it can actually really help advocate, or it can help you advocate for yourself in your career journey.
Yeah, thanks. So my first job out of college in the late 90s was at a startup that failed. And the woman that hired me was going back to Oracle. She left, tried to start up, and went back. Because of the relationship that we had built in that short time, she said, give me a bit, I'll get you in. And she did. And I think that experience early in my career, number one, building relationships, so important. And number two, the instability of a startup minimized the level of risk that I was willing to take on from there on. It sort of set the groundwork for digging into what I was building at Oracle at the time. And at a larger company, you can really find avenues to continue to grow and learn. And I pivoted my career every 5 or 6 years to it felt like I was starting fresh and starting new and starting something again and learning and growing. Could I have left? Yeah, I could have left, but I saw this revolving door at that time where people would leave and come back and they would leave. And so I thought, well, maybe the grass isn't actually greener. And I stayed. And like Kate was talking about, and Cristina, things in my life, I had children, they were just, my career ebbed and flowed over the years. And it worked for me. And I do feel like by staying and building myself within that company, I was able to further advocate for myself and use that too in my next career at Twilio, and really use what I did over the long term. And here at Twilio, staying over 3 years, building upon where I started. I started as a frontline manager of 10 people in the East, and I now lead a team of 75 SCs with 9 frontline managers reporting to me for North America. So that wouldn't have happened if I jumped to another opportunity quickly. So the other thing with the massive growth that Twilio has had, you can imagine I do a ton of interviewing, and it's definitely those resumes that stick out, not in the best way, of the people that jump around. And you have to ask why. And I always dig into the why. And sometimes there's good reason behind it and we get past it, but it's definitely something to think about when you're applying for jobs. Mm-hmm. Could you have looked for something within your company to further grow your career? Of course, the fit has to be good culturally, but for me, it really meant staying and building upon where I was.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, probably like Cristina and Kate, I also have a similar experience, right? Like I basically grew my pre-sales career at one company that was acquired by IBM, but it was almost 11, 12 years. And again, being able, to leverage my network and brand, it helps so much foundationally. And then, similar to you moving from Oracle to Twilio, I moved from IBM to DocuSign and have now been here 8 years. And I don't know if I would be in the position I'm in today as well if I had continued to make those moves every few years to different companies, because, you really do, you can't underestimate, establishing that strong personal brand in your network, within your own company, and how that plays into, like we were just saying, having those people advocate for you in your own career, whether, whatever direction you may want to take that. It definitely opens doors. So, okay, great.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, Leah, I think you're both of you are spot on, because if I look back, again, 26-year career, my most successful positions, moving from company to company or position, has more to do with the relationships I built early on. I'll give you an example. At Oracle, my boss and good friend is Tom Henry, great guy. We started working together 20 years ago. So that building that trust, that brand, that respect is crucial. And it's really important to just, wherever you are, ensure that you are building those relationships and building that respect and that trust and that brand, because it will carry you beyond just the 2 years, the 3 years, the 5 years, but really looking out 20 years from now, depending upon how long everyone's career. I hope everyone retires young, but for those of us who can't, it just helps you as you continue your career.
And I honestly think, Cristina, it leads into why finding the right company to grow your career is so important for you. Like, you've got to feel that like cultural and connection, right, to the people that you're speaking with. And I think what we've all realized as part of this like huge movement that we're seeing in pre-sales, and I know there's some people in the audience that aren't technically in it today, but might be interested. There's so many careers outside of pre-sales that build the skills, the transferable skills for this career. And I can share recently at DocuSign, we just hired a school teacher, believe it or not, into a pre-sales position, and she is phenomenal. So shout out to Chelsea McHale. But Kate and Cristina, I mean, I'd love to hear how you advocate. And I think there's an element of this, right? Is like, how do you advocate that you are the most qualified, or this position is a great fit for you and your skills, even when you may not be that qualified, right? Like the person next to you might have the resume and some of the experience, but this is a good fit for you and you want to advocate for yourself into this position.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on, which is, you mentioned it, highlighting transferable skills, because you'd be surprised. In our day-to-day lives, there's always a transferable skill. You just have to figure out which one that you're strong, or that you have such core strength in, is something that's transferable. I'll just give you an example again at Oracle. Because I run an SE team that's focused on the back office applications, so all the cloud, actually even on-prem, we hire people who are CPAs, supply chain managers. So the skill set, or even industry knowledge, that skill set is 100% transferable over. But then we also look for people where they've demonstrated what I call grit, perseverance, where they've done something, where they've jumped into a burning bridge to save a dog, because I love puppies. But any of those things that have demonstrated that, it just shows a grit factor with a transferable skill.
That's great. Kate, anything to add?
Yeah, I think, to Christina's point, the best way to kind of do some of that, hey, here's how my skills transfer, is try to get in and really understand the role. If you know somebody at the company, get in and really understand like what it is. I'm a big believer that if you have passion and you have curiosity, you're going to be a great SE. And I don't care if you were a teacher, a consultant, almost until the Pre-Sales Academy, there was no like way into the SE role. We all came through different means, right? Product managers, there's a lot of them. But if you go in like kind of with an open and curious mind, and you know what I mean? Like, and you make those connections, you're gonna be like, oh, that's like when I do these 5 things at my job and this at my job. And then all of a sudden you're gonna have great specific examples to share with the hiring manager. You're going to have the outcomes that you drove. And so you're going to feel less like a leap or a risk. And then if you can also share, how do you learn? How do you learn new things? And then I think that all of a sudden, anything where there might be a perceived gap is gone, and you're having a great conversation.
Yep. And I think, just to kind of, expand on that too, it's like once you advocate for yourself to get into that pre-sales role, probably, as leaders, you're then looking for what is the next right move. And I just want to say, and I have this conversation a lot with SEs at DocuSign, it's a destination career to be a solution engineer or solution consultant. I mean, I love interacting with them, right? Like they love the position. They love what they're doing every day. They love the different challenges that they're going to get when they interact with customers. That said, I know we also have a lot of people on the team that are advocating for themselves and, to move from IC to manager. And it's probably one of the most common questions as leaders will get, right? And so I think all of us being leaders, having, large teams, it'd be great to share with the audience, like what are we looking for in the individual contributors to advocate for themselves, to start to move into that leadership position? Like, are there skills that IC should be leaning into long before they're in that people manager role? And I just love to hear the perspective, from this panel on what that might look like.
Yeah, maybe I can start a little bit.
Sure, that'd be great. Yeah.
Well, I should start by saying, and I don't know if many people know this, but often SE management, when they're looking for an SE manager or an SE manager replaced or growing a team, you name it, the leadership team already has individuals in mind for that position. It's called succession planning. So if organizations are doing this right, they have succession planners or succession planning. They have individuals that they said, you know, we're going to grow these individual contributors, or we're going to grow, we're going to potentially bring someone over from another team. And it's important to know that, because if you're an individual contributor and you want to move into a leadership role, it's important that, again, you advocate for that well in advance. I say it has to be at least 6 months. I would recommend well over a year, that this is something that you're interested in, and just ask either your direct manager or other managers. If there's other teams that you're interested in, or there's other relationships that you have, ask them, what would you need to work on to be considered for a management role? That's a fantastic question to ask. What do I need to work on? I'd like to move into a leadership role. What do I need to work on that will, you know, continue to bolster me for a role? There's always areas. The second is, all of us have hundreds of projects. It's like, I call it our side hustle. Yeah. We always have this side hustle that we're working on, and then there's the day-to-day job. Any individual who's willing to help, you know, myself, other leaders with that side hustle is amazing, because then you start understanding more of the things that the leadership team has to do or does on a day-to-day basis. I would suggest offering to not only participate in interviews, but actually also lead the interviews, do some of the initial interview, the vetting process as part of that, because then you kind of understand what I call the not so glamorous part of the SE leadership role. And then you can assess, is this really what I want to do? Because it's that side hustle that I think is really important to understand. It's not just coaching. That's, I think, my favorite part is the coaching piece, but there are a lot of other things that we need to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, couple quick things. I mean, on the succession planning, I agree, right? Like, I think more and more companies, and I can share, like DocuSign is doing this now as well, is like we're putting much more formal programs in place around succession planning, and really having, like, here are the internal candidates, here are the external candidates, and trying to just really steep that into the culture in a much bigger way as well. Because leader roles are competitive. And Kate, I wanted to, you know, hear your perspective on this, because I know you've shared those sentiments as well.
Yeah, first of all, I couldn't agree more with Cristina that you shouldn't be thinking today, I'd like to be a leader, and expect that it's going to happen in a short period of time, because you need time to have the conversation, make people aware that that's your goal. It's extremely competitive. Every time we post a leader role inside Salesforce, even if we don't advertise it much, there are, you know, dozens and dozens of people who apply for that role. And so, you know, what I'd say is, as part of that planning ahead, understand the types of roles that are there that you might be interested in. Being an SE leader for a really deep technical SE team is different than if you're leading a team of SEs who are focused on, like, the very strategic large accounts. It's just a different day-to-day motion. So understand the day-to-day motion and what goes into it. Because I think, to Cristina's point, there's a lot of unglamorous parts. Everybody sees the coaching and mentoring, and they want to get in and they want to do that, and that's great. It's a surprisingly small amount of time that we spend in that. And so, as you get to know what it is, I'm a big fan of, you know, start to build your why me deck. I think it's uncomfortable to sell yourself. So if you take a step back and think about yourself like you would prepare for a customer meeting, most of the people on this call are already in solution engineering or solution engineering leadership. You know how to get ready for a customer meeting. You know how to bring out your differentiation and that kind of a thing. And so if you start writing it down and putting it into a deck, you're going to see, oh, I don't have enough tangible examples of, I love it, you call it the side hustle, Cristina. We all wear so many hats as an SE. If you want to take on an extra project, it can be like, maybe you love strategy. Great. How do you help, you know, your fellow SEs do some strategic workshop? Maybe you love building assets. Whatever it is, it's providing value back to the company. And just make sure that you've got lots of those great examples where you've taken the initiative, you've driven something, you've been a leader from an IC role, and evolve that deck. and dry run it with people. Like put all your SE skills to work as you plan this. You wouldn't go into a customer meeting unprepared. Don't go in alone. And it is super uncomfortable to talk about yourself. The more you practice it, the less it's going to feel awkward.
I love the why feedback. Yeah, I love that.
Won't be as awkward.
Right. All right, panel, then I have a very important follow-up question. Do you have anyone on your teams that love pre-sales, but don't necessarily want to move into leadership, yet they still want to advocate for themselves in their career journey?
You know,
I'll open it up. Yeah.
I can jump in. Yes. It's surprising to me the number of people that I have a career conversation with, and I say, what do you want to do? And they say leadership. And I'm like, great. What do you love about your job? Oh my God, I love being deep with the product. I love being on site with the customer all the time. Yeah. Awesome. How often do you see your boss do that? Then they're like, and the eyes get open, and then they're like, okay, but I want to be advancing my career, right? I still want to be moving forward. And so we, then can pivot the conversation to, is it a more strategic side hustle that has sponsorship up to the executive levels? Is your goal to be, the go-to person for our OU when Mark Benioff is going to a customer? Do you want to be in our big exec meetings? Or maybe you want to be much deeper in a product area. And so what's great then is having the people really focus on, okay, what do they love? What gets them up at, what in the middle of a Saturday afternoon has them spending some extra time because they've been wanting to get to something. Mm-hmm. And I think, but it's surprising, it's shocking, like a good 50% of my career conversations with prospective leaders, and then they realize, I don't want to lead people. I want to be the guy in front of the room. So but it's great. And then you can really pivot the conversation because it's a very different type of self-advocacy. It's more about being the subject matter expert.
Yeah.
Exactly. I could not agree more. I don't think management is the only way to grow your career. It's a misconception that in order to do more or be more, I have to manage people. And that is not the case at all. I actually didn't want to be a manager for a lot of the reasons you talked about, Kate. I'm very happy I did. And looking back, it was the right path for me. But not everybody needs to manage people to lead. There are so many ways to lead in the career you're in the role you're in right now, that don't include managing. Twilio created a team lead position last year that is a way for SEs to not manage the people on their team, but their peers, their ownership and their leadership is showcased, and they're dipping their toe in just to see, is this something I might like? Is this not something? We also created another level of SC because we realized there were, SCs didn't have a career path past where they were. So there's now an additional level for our most senior SCs to get promoted into. And so if your company has that type of offering, it's a really great way to stay as an SC for, like you said, it could be a very, a destination. Yeah. To be an SE for a very long time and not feel like you need to go into management.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just to add to that, just the one thing that sometimes I hear that one of the reasons why someone is considering a leadership role is the compensation package. That could not be, that might have been true if I was saying 20 years ago. That could be further from the truth as it sits today. We have a level of distinguished engineer over at Oracle. Some of the best and the brightest, and their compensation model is in line with a VP. So it's more impact on the business that matters, especially as you think of distinguished engineers. And then I just had this conversation with one of the master principals on my team. I actually mentioned to him that he is a leader. If anything, he amplifies whatever he thinks and says and believes actually is amplified throughout the organization, because SCs will look to him as a leader, as a representative of the individual contributors out there. And it's important that he's bought into, the process, the strategy, all this, because I know that's going to reverberate through the organization. And so it's, as someone put this in the Slack, you don't have to be in management to be a leader. 100%. Sorry.
Great. Yep, absolutely. So Such great insights. I'd love to kind of take the conversation in a little bit of a different direction and talk about advocacy when you are the minority in the room. You are the underrepresented minority in the room. It's hard. And Nancy, as a woman leader in technology, the reality is oftentimes we are the minority in the room or on the call. I'd love to hear how you advocate when you feel uncomfortable or you think it may hurt your career. I can personally share, like, I feel like this is an area I've tried to invest a lot in my own growth, because it can be hard to insert your point of view or, just jump into the conversation when you are that minority. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
So the majority of my career, it was very typical to be the only woman in the room, whether it was with the sales team, the SC teams, the customers were all men, and myself. But what gives me hope is truly seeing that this is changing. And so those that come after us, they're in a different position, but it still happens every day, right? And I still hear plenty of examples of situations where women are put in challenging positions. Things like this PreSales Collective WISE community, the Twilio WISE chapter that I had the opportunity, and I'm so grateful that I had a team of folks around me to help get that off the ground and give women a place to go to ask each other, was this, out of line, or should I be bothered by this? Sometimes you're not sure and you question it. And so to have others that you can really bounce things off of is really helpful. And then our allies. So men that show up are so incredibly important to this improving and making a difference. And I've seen men advocate and stand up to other men that they might hear says something off color, or I think that might have made her feel uncomfortable. Or to your point, they're seeing someone trying to step into the conversation, can't get a word in, and they make space. I think that's so helpful and appreciated when the men in our world are being the sponsors for us that we need. And then, holding each other accountable, I think, is really critical to us all seeing this be different. But then there's the times where things are not necessarily things you can deal with among yourselves. And of course, you'd want to go to HR and speak up and advocate for yourself and others that are coming after you in case they ever run into it with that same person. But one of the things I hear I've given good advice about, so I'll give it here, is that if you're nervous to speak up to the person that has made you feel uncomfortable, write down the things that made you feel that way and go in with a script, kind of like what Kate was saying, right? You prep for that conversation, just like you prep for any other conversation. If you can't address it in the moment, address it one-on-one and dry run it. Come up with the 3 points that, really were relevant and shift the focus to the facts. And more times than not, you'll find that person had no ill will. They had no bad intention. They actually didn't even realize they were saying something that could have been misconstrued. And they thank you for the feedback. I've had this so many times. Thank you for telling me. I had no idea that made you feel that way. And now you've helped them not do it again to other people. Often, that's the, how I found, my going to people and telling them they made me feel uncomfortable is received. And I hear that from others too. So I'd say tackle it head on. And when you're uncomfortable, prep. But, sometimes you'll run into it and you do need to report it. That's also very important.
That's great. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to that?
Yeah, I just one thing, and it's that high tide raises all boats. And we've been talking about self-advocacy, but in the example that Nancy was providing or is providing. It's
Mhm.
it's also advocating. If you see bad behavior or you see things, it's also a great opportunity to advocate for others and help others find their voice. If someone is in a group meeting and perhaps they get, that person isn't able to, come in and give their view, their perspective, and you see it, it's absolutely perfect to come in and say, oh, I hear Cristina might have a point. Cristina, do you have something that you'd like to bring up? So advocacy is not just, I guess, focus on self, but really advocating for voice for everyone.
I love that. I love that. That's great. And just to do a quick time check, so we've got about 11 minutes left. I want to ask one more question, and it's coming at you, Kate, in a second. And then Julia, I do see your question in the Q&A, and I think it ties really nicely into our closing. So we'll ask one more question. We'll share some advice, and then we can open it up to see if there's any other questions as well. But Kate, both of us being in Philly and, our company's also working closely together. I've had the pleasure of partnering with you and seeing you operate. You've been an unbelievable mentor to myself and many other leaders at DocuSign through WISE, but other ways as well. And, I know you're so well respected at Salesforce, and you've recently been promoted to SVP. So that's so impressive. One, just congratulations. There's very few women in any type of SVP role in technology, let alone solution engineering. So I thought it would be great if you don't mind sharing what you think some of the key contributors to your success have been that others might be able to learn from.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. And by the way, right back at you. The partnership, it's just done amazing things for WISE, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Really early in my career as an SE, one of my mentors said to me, you just need to be yourself and speak up. Stop trying to be, the person who is onboarding me, and stop trying to be this person. You have to be yourself, and you have to speak up when you see something that's off base. You earned a seat at this table. And that was just really, I'm so glad that I got that advice very early in my career, because a big part of who I am is I like to help define new roles. I like to help figure out how to fill gaps that exist. And I've had the opportunity to do that at Salesforce. And I think one of the big reasons that I've had the opportunity to do that at Salesforce too, is because I focus a lot on building my network. And when I think about my network, certainly it's mentors, it's sponsors, but it's also peers. It's also ICs who have a unique skill set that I want to learn from. I went to a great speech one time that said, you also always want your pace car. Not that you're comparing yourself to this person, but you know what I mean? Like, hey, did they onboard it as similar to like who's out there, so that you're not just stuck in your own bubble. And because of that, I was able to learn when we first introduced the enterprise architect role. I was one of the early cohorts, because that was something that I thought was so important for the company. And similarly, when we started a new segment focused on enterprise accounts, I was able to kind of completely change the group that I was in to go work on those, just because I recognized, hey, this is a growing area of the business. It's something that I just love to help do. But truth be told, I think the biggest impact has been WISE. When, it's almost 6.5 years now that we realized, we were in a meeting, and my co-founder Jen and I were the 2 of the 3 women in the room full of 60 leaders, and we were like, okay, we have to do something about this. And by the way, that's how the idea started for WISE in general, was we have to do something about this, and we didn't know what. But what it did was it really grew my network, because I had to go and talk to a lot of people to see what would be beneficial. We had to seek out male allies, because there's just not a lot of senior women in leadership. And it frankly, it really helped hone my executive presentation skills, because every third question was, why wouldn't you just do this as part of Salesforce Women's Network? And so we had to be really crisp about why this was different, and why pre-sales is not the same as a corporate-based job, and why travel, and the fact that you're in meeting with 90% men, or all men and you, it is a big thing that we needed to work through. And so I really think WISE was a big turning point. And then truth be told, Leah, working with you and Kelly to start expanding WISE, because DocuSign was the second WISE organization, and then with PSC. And it's just helped me take a step back and really think about what's the impact we're making. Not just am I working hard. I think a lot of people work hard and they think, oh, I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to close big deals and people are going to promote me. But it's more than that. It's the impact. And Nancy, I think you said it, and the willingness to sort of jump in and say, hey, here's the impact that I or my team or whoever have been making, and just make sure that people are aware of that.
That's awesome. I mean, it's remarkable, right? Because I think you truly founded WISE for our entire industry. And the impact that it can have in just leadership development, right? Like, we have so many people within our own WISE program today, not leaders, but we are stretching them, right? Because they're running a steering committee or they're presenting updates to different parts of the organization, and it's muscles that they're starting to flex that they may not in their day-to-day. And it's just helping them just become stronger performers. So thank you. I love hearing your story. Okay, and just looking at the time, Julia, we were going to close on the best piece of career advice that we've all ever received. So Julia had asked the question, if you only have one tip to give a SE at the beginning of the career, what would it be? And Julia's in Brazil, which is fantastic. So I thought we could just round table and go around and talk about, our number one tip or best piece of advice that we've ever received. And Kate, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So when I first joined Salesforce after stepping out of being VP of product management, somebody said to me, why did you come over as an SE? And I said, I'd moved up the ranks and I wasn't spending any time with customers. And I was really focused too much on back office. And she said to me, why did you let that happen? And it was like, just kind of mind boggling, but it made me realize you have to make each role what you want it to be for you. And I'm not saying if you're an SE, then, you're going to go out and just, never meet with customers, but you have the ability to shape how you approach your role, and nobody else does. And so that was really just eye-opening for me. And I've done that ever since.
That's great. Nancy?
Yeah, and before I give it, I have to say thank you to both of you, obviously, because Twilio WISE is because of all of you as well. So it's just paying it forward over and over. We're so thankful. So one of the best things I heard and then I promote is you find your thing. Find that thing that you are going to be the go-to for. And whether it's your product, whether it's just deep dive into an industry, find out, it should be something you enjoy, right? And because you'll be that much more motivated to learn more about it. But what's your thing, right? What are you known for? What are you the go-to for is really what helped me. And then those kudos emails I talked about are typically they come a lot faster when you're the go-to for something and you've added value in a sales cycle.
That's great. Cristina?
My number one would be build and nurture your relationships. And I say build, I was originally just thinking build, but no, you need to nurture them. Career, especially if you're early in your career is 20, 25, 30, 35 years in the making. And it's the relationships that you build on a personal and professional level that will help propel you throughout your career. I'll tell you right now, 100% of my 26-year career in pre-sales is based on relationships that I cultivated, built trust, and it's really helped me and propelled my career. So I would say that's probably number one for me.
That's fantastic. I'll plus one to that too, but I'll give a different tip. And this is really something I learned early on at DocuSign, and actually before DocuSign, but it's really know your business, be able to have a narrative on your business, know the data. And I think coupled with that is, and one of my very first, when I moved into leadership, my first boss as a leader said to me, it's going to be very important what you escalate up to me and what you take down and own yourself, right? Because you need to be handling as much as you humanly can. And then if you need me, great. But he was very clear that was part of how he was going to evaluate me in the role. And I thought it was good advice. And I think even regardless of individual contributor leader, you know, you want to be able to just know your business, take care of your business, but, you know, at the same time, know when it makes sense to go out and ask for that help as well. So, all right. Oh my God. And we have 1 minute left. Do we have time? Are there any other questions? I guess we have one. Well, you know what? I'm gonna close it out then. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you so much to the audience. We really hope that, you know, you've learned from the conversation and been able to walk away from our webinar today with at least one new tool that you might be able to use in your next negotiation or to think about as you're building your own career. So thank you all. This was a great discussion. Thank you. Thanks, guys.